sword fishing boat had to be fast because they had a person on the bowsprit. So they'd spy the swordfish, and the boat had to sail fast to catch these fast fish.
Airlie was built on Tancook Island in 1929. Of all the small schooners we own, she's probably the most storied of the small schooners because of her ability to go fast.
I love these old wooden schooners, that's for sure. I have this schooner, and then when I heard about Airlie, I didn't have any choice but to go get her because it was going to be destroyed, and I just can't have that.
Hello, I'm Tom Murphy. Welcome to Land and Sea. Racing yachts today are a marvel of technology, light enough to rise up out of the water on hydrofoils. But the earliest racing boats were also working boats. In the Maritimes, they were whalers and schooners racing to get back from the fishing grounds first and get the best price for their catch. A few of those wooden schooners are still with us, though some are in a precarious position. A group of enthusiasts in Nova Scotia is trying to change that. In the process, one man is rescuing part of Nova Scotia's sailing history. And it's all linked to the most successful female racing skipper that the province has ever seen. When the schooner Airlie arrived in Chester Basin in 2022, its deck planking had rotted off. But still, it represented a major win for the Nova Scotia Heritage Schooner Rescue Society. It's a reflection of the Society's whole reason for existing. Founder Jim Carwardine says the idea for the Society came from a conversation he had with the now late Alfie Lonis, who owned the schooner Elsie.
The way that we started was with the Historical Society of the Nova Scotia Schooner Association. And the owner of the Elsie and I were on that same committee, and we started talking about how these schooners were starting to disappear. Elsie was a candidate because Alfie at the time was in his mid-80s. And so the conversation kind of went towards me taking over the boat. I'm a few years younger than Alfie, but it turned out, as we were talking about this, another schooner came into my purview, which is in Montreal, which is the Glendora, which was built in 1931 on Tancook Island. So my attention was drawn there, and I had to do something about Elsie because Alfie wasn't going to be able to carry on. And so the idea of the Schooner Rescue Society is what I came up with, and that's where we started working on that. Alfie and I started working on that, and then about 3 or 4 months later, Alfie died. And so we had to carry on, and I had to get other people involved.
Wooden boats are like pianos. If you look hard enough, you can get one for the cost of hauling it away. But if you don't know what you're doing, or you don't have a lot of money you're aching to part with, taking a 100-year-old wooden schooner out on the ocean can quickly make you wish you'd chosen the piano instead. For the members of the Heritage Schooner Rescue Society, though, wooden boats are a labor of love. Between them, the Society members own almost 40.
I'm passionately interested, dedicated to preserving these boats. And the reason that I want to do it is because they're a piece of art, they're a piece of functioning art, they're a piece of engineering. They served a particular purpose historically. I think probably most owners would say the biggest reason they have a schooner is because they're beautiful. They're lovely, lovely boats. They're a lovely piece of functioning art.
And if you care about the history of sailing in Nova Scotia, Airlie has a tale that could warm your heart. It involves Willa Creighton, a legendary racing skipper. But it starts before she was even born.
Airlie is kind of a unique story. First of all, let me say that Airlie was built on Tancook Island in 1929. And Airlie was there when the Nova Scotia Schooner Association was originally formed in 1961. And Airlie had a reputation for winning races. She's probably, of all the small schooners we own, she's probably the most storied of the small schooners because of her ability to go fast.
A schooner rig is familiar to most Canadians, whether they know it or not. You might have a picture of one in your pocket right now on the back of a dime. The aft mast is taller than the foremast, and its many sails make it versatile in changing wind conditions. In Nova Scotia, the shape of the local schooners evolved over generations, often because of the work of the boat builders of Tancook Island. Here is Tancook boat builder Gerald Stevens back in 1965.
Well, the schooner developed really from the whaler, and the original schooners, as we know them today, the transom schooners, they were very, very similar to the whaler itself. The double end was gone by the board, and the transom stern came into the picture, and the resemblance was still from the quarter lines aft. It was very similar to the whaler, but as time went on, they developed to the Tancook schooner as we knew them and as the fishing fleet was on the island. There was a very large fleet there. I know of, we've had them counted to, I think there was 60 that we know of that were built and sailed on the island. And as the years went by, their graceful lines grew to what we know them as today.
Coming up.
Especially at the time when, she was being referred to as a housewife and that sort of thing, for her to be able to get out in the water and just be toe-to-toe with all the guys. It wasn't competition. She wasn't trying to make a statement. She just did what she felt she could and wasn't trying to be a star, a martyr, or anything like that. But it's only in retrospect that you realize, wow, she really moved the needle.
Airlie was built in the Mason Yard on Tancook Island in 1929 as a sword fishing boat. It had to be fast enough under sail to catch up to a giant swordfish, while a crew member stood on the bowsprit with a harpoon. When the schooner's working life was over, it went through a refit to become a yacht. Willa Creighton's family spent their summers in Chester and owned Airlie from the mid-1950s till the mid-1970s.
Racing is certainly a big part of it, but we also went cruising as a family. And that was great for the younger ones who weren't able to be on board during the races. And, Mom and Dad would just cook up these wonderful meals down below in the little galley. And we had these plastic green plates. I can still remember them. I can remember the picnic basket that held them all. I think one of the 7 kids has that now. And if we were really lucky, we were able to sleep up on deck under the stars. And usually the older ones were allowed to do that. And we had these very lumpy mattresses or seat covers, and occasionally a tarp, but more often than no tarp. And so just falling asleep under the stars, and you'd hear, one of my favorite sounds to this day, and you can hear it on a flagpole or you can hear it on a mast, just the halyard gently smashing quietly. That smashing is the wrong word, but lapping against. And it just brings me back to my youth and, that feeling of security and adventure.
But Julia's mother, Willa Creighton, is the reason that the name Airlie is still known on Nova Scotia's South Shore decades later. David Creighton has been Commodore of the Chester Yacht Club, and he sailed all over the world, but he started on Airlie with his mother, Willa.
I'm pregnant with you, 1956.
1956. I was born in 58, so, but still, that would have been me, and that's when I started sailing.
Grandmom and Granddad.
Yeah. She had just a natural talent. And also with Herman Wilson, who was the older guy who sort of worked with us and coached us and kept the boats in shape and that sort of thing. He had just such a wonderful light touch, and she adopted that. And, constantly just sort of looking at the environment around her, the shape of the sails, puffs on the water, any weather that was on the horizon, all these different things that, these days everybody just tries to look at an iPhone and sort of get all that information. But, in the days of proper seamanship, you're trying to take all that stuff in on your own. So She, as I say, just had a really wonderful natural touch. And a schooner is not a really easy boat to race. They have a small jib. They don't point particularly well. They love going downwind, but you win a race quite often by being able to go upwind. And she was able to do that well. Being a female skipper at the time and winning races. She didn't need to be respected because she already had a persona that was, commanded attention and that sort of thing. But boy, this just solidified it. And still to this day, I bump into people and they say, are you Willa's son? And she was something. And conversely, your mom, so this is from female sailors that I know these days, your mom was the one who told me, that I can compete on a boat as well as anybody else can. And they've gone on and made a life of sailing for themselves as women. And there she is, receiving the trophy of the Herald Mail.
This is Willa Creighton in 1971 being interviewed on board Airlie.
You're a housewife.
That's right.
This keeps you pretty busy then, I presume, eh?
In the winter times, particularly, yeah. Mm-hmm. We have 7 children. I don't know if you knew that. I guess maybe that's been going the rounds, that one. So, yeah, I'm fairly tied down in the winter time, I must say, the housewife label, which is why we all have such a good time, I think, when we get into one of these challenge championship dues. I think there are lots of people that are in my position. We're sort of hard at work on schedules and things all winter, and then we have 2 weeks to do something else with and sort of break all tradition of what we have during the wintertime.
Mm-hmm. All right, we've cleared that out that you are a busy woman as far as your housework and family is concerned, and it just amazes me that you can find the time to take part in your favorite hobby of sailing. How did all this come about, you becoming a skipper of your own boat?
Well, it happened a long, long time ago. I suppose my parents bought this schooner, a Hancock-built schooner she was, about 20 years old when they bought her 20 years ago, so she's up around 40 now, I suppose. And my brothers and I were very scathing about the whole idea of old Mom and Dad going out in a funny old boat like this. We were more interested in our one design sloop, a little more sport to it and so on. And then I don't know how I ever got the job of being on the stick. I think when I got weaker and tireder and older, then this was about all that was left for me to do. And, the strong boys were still on the sheets and so on. And like anything else, practice, if you practice enough at one particular job, then in the end, that's the slot you land in.
Coming up.
And then I went home and made sure my wife was in a good mood. And he said, would you like to pack your bags and we'll go on a little trip? Where are we going? I said, get packing. We got to leave in the morning. We're heading to Connecticut.
Airlie had a successful career as a sword fishing boat and a storied history as a racing boat. When the Creightons eventually sold the schooner, it ended up in New England, and its story almost ended there. But it's back in Nova Scotia now, thanks to the efforts of the Nova Scotia Heritage Schooner Rescue Society, and especially one of its members, Harley Schofield. Harley is a man who loves old boats, and because he makes his living restoring historic homes, he has the skills to keep wooden boats floating. Harley also owns a schooner, Wawaloon, which he has already restored.
Well, this is the Mort and Jerry Pelham trophy. And Mort Pelham once owned the Wawaloon. He was the guy that took it from this herring boat to the yacht. And this was a trophy they donated to the Nova Scotia Schooner Association. So every year, somebody that does something spectacular or bigger to keep schooners going wins this trophy. And I've been hoping for it for quite a few years. So I was pretty excited to get it this year.
Harley already had one schooner. He didn't need another or the expense of rebuilding it. But his love of wooden boats drew him to Airlie like a magnet.
She was in Connecticut in a yard, hauled, and she had been there for 8 years. She was in a building, but not a closed-in building, but she was going to be cut up, and cut up now was the thing. It's gone on too long. So the yard owner wanted the space. The owner of Airlie knew he had to let her go, right? Because he didn't have the time. And so the Schooner Rescue Society heard of this plight, let's say. And there was a family in, I believe, Maine that were trying to get Airlie. But the cost of trucking her to Maine from Connecticut was, they didn't have the funds for that. And they were trying to raise funds online. And that's where the Schooner Rescue Society got involved. And they called me and said, could you help out with donation of some kind? We found Airlie, and here's her plight. That's the end of her. So they called me on a Saturday, I believe. I was here at this shop, and I said I would help. I'd love to help. And then they called me back on a Sunday and said, it's not going to work. They can't raise enough money quick enough. And so they're going to cut her up. The breakers have already been in to have a look at it, because a lot of bronze on it and so on. And I thought about it for a few minutes, and then I went home and made sure my wife was in a good mood, and he said, would you like to pack your bags and we'll go on a little trip? Where are we going? I said, get packing. We got to leave in the morning. We're heading to Connecticut, right? Anyway, we happily went to Connecticut, and I got to meet the owner of the yard, John, who was just a really great guy and obliging best he could be. And Ryan and his wife Ashley that owned the boat, they were lovely people and obliging and helpful in so many ways. And so getting along well with them, we could make a deal that I could get a truck from Nova Scotia there, but it was late in the year and the truck got caught in a snowstorm, and we had to keep calling John, making apologies. But anyway, it finally showed up. And we got it across the border and got all that stuff done. And so it was just wonderful to have her home. And so now I have to do what I said I was going to do and have to finish it. So that's where we're at.
And that means a lot of money, a lot of work, and learning to do things in traditional ways.
This is the worm gear that the steering mechanism goes on the transom of the boat, not on the transom, but on the back deck. And the ship's wheel goes on here. It's on a bit of an angle, the way it fastens down. And this is a product made at Lunenburg Foundry, and it's a worm gear. And as I turn it, this mechanism moves back and forth on the worm, and it has nipples for grease and so on, which needs all of that. And that turns the rudder in the boat back and forth with the ship's wheels. So it's going back on the boat. And we've got to fit it so I can put the blocking in where necessary prior to the decks going on. And so this is for the ship's wheel. So it's a wonderful piece of machinery and made, once again, in Lunenburg. So, perfect. Working on a project like Airlie, you're beat, you're tired, you go home, you try to eat something, and you lay down, and you sleep, and you dream about it, and you can hardly wait to come back the next morning and start all over again, right? It's just so rewarding, and when it's done, it's so beautiful. It's like doing an oil painting. It's just out of this world. So you can't get much more rewarding. You got to love working on them every bit as much as you love sailing them, because they'll never get in the water if you don't love working on them.
Harley Schofield's project to rebuild Airlie has gotten a lot of attention in the world of wooden boat sailors.
Everybody that's had association with Airlie, and there's a lot of them, are just thrilled, and they're all part of it. They come and see her, they're excited to see her, and this facility makes it nice for that. Yeah, we had 4 yesterday, I think, come in, and one chap, him and some friends have built a lovely Sambro skiff or whatever, they're in look at and want to come back, So that's great, right? It makes more people more part of what's going on. And that's what we want to do in the end. I'm hoping to get it far enough I can put it in the water next year, but it won't be finished. It'll take basically probably 3 years total to finish her. And I'm shoving it as long as my health holds it.
The Nova Scotia Heritage Schooner Rescue Society is saving an important part of our seafaring history from the scrapyard. But the group is mostly people in their golden years. They know they have to make plans to hand this project on to future generations. Harley Schofield has an idea. It involves Willa Creighton's beloved Airlie, Wawaloon, and a third schooner, the Cathy Ann, that was given to him since he took possession of Airlie.
So the plan is that these wooden schooners, I want to see them keep going. And so the plan is when we have the schooners finished, that we will sail out of South Shore Marine, probably. These schooners will sail out to the islands, and Mahone Bay Island Preservation Society has done a wonderful thing in the last quite a few years, you know, with help from many organizations and private individuals, donations and so on. And they've saved a lot of these islands which were being bought up and big homes put on them. So they're for the use of the general public. So the schooners, we want to sail to these islands because now they're putting in moorings and stuff, so very easy to go to them. A lot of them bulk of them have beaches, so we can go there, anchor, take a group of people that don't have to pay to do something like this, that the ordinary, any groups could book us to do that. And we'll take them out to the islands and we'll spend a day, whether they get to enjoy the islands, they get to enjoy sailing on an old wooden schooner and maybe learn some of the sail, you know, what to do to sail one of these boats. So we need to have lots of people, and we'd like to see young faces, because one of them young faces is going to put his arm over my shoulder someday and says, Harley, I really want your boats. And we're going to sign papers really quickly.
These are museum pieces, and we're preserving not only the art, but the engineering and the skills of these original builders.
I don't know, we always say that anybody that owns a schooner is about half mad, because otherwise he'd have something else that was maybe a little more practical.